Hello, everyone. How are you? Welcome to our webinar today. So I wonder if you could just type a chat box in the chat box, a hello from wherever you are from. So in my case, I'd be saying hello from Porto. Let's see if we can travel around the country. Elizabeth, we've started, so you should be hearing your sound. If you haven't heard, if you still can't hear, can you please shut down your computer, restart, and perhaps it'll work for you. Right. Hi, Isabel. So good to see you. Carla, can you hear us now? Can you just give me a thumbs up so I know and don't worry about you? So we start off our trip today in São João da Madeira, and we visit Vila Real and Esteves as well. Hi, Lydia. Great to see you with us today. I've seen a few people from Madeira too, and I saw a few friends from Aveiro. Hi, Susanna. Good to see you again. And Joanna, hi, from Porto, like me. Hi, Mary. How are you? Mary is from Viana do Castelo, and she's watching us today as well. So hi, KWL. Right, today we get together. We are able to get together to have some fun. And my co-authors and I have prepared a wonderful webinar for you so that together we can tackle the demon of rephrasing in the classroom. So, are you ready to get going? Type yes in the chat box if you are. And in the meantime, I can't resist saying hello to Conceição and to Dulce. It's really good to have you with us. And to Teresa as well. Hi, Fatima. Right, so let's get started. It seems that everybody's ready. Today, we will have 3 objectives. So we're going to start off by thinking about why we should be doing rephrasing in the classroom, if indeed we should be doing it at all. And then we're going to be moving into analyzing why it is that rephrasing is such a difficult exercise for our students. I mean, it really gives them a workout, if you know what I mean. And the biggest part of our webinar will be dedicated to actually experiencing a few tips that I have for you, for yourself. So here we'll be thinking about individual activities and tasks that actually build rephrasing resilience. So as you can see, we're going to have some fun for the next 40 minutes. Now, the great Shakespeare started off by asking, to be or not to be? And today I have a similar question for you. To rephrase or not to rephrase? So can I please ask you to type in the chat box whether you think that we should be doing rephrasing in the classroom? And as you're doing that, let me just say hi to Francisca and Teresa, who I haven't seen for a while. So it's really great to have so many friends with us today. Right, Graça has got us going, and she believes that rephrasing is a definite yes. Emilia is backing her up. It's one of those things that you just have to do. Hi, Lucia, great having you with us. Louisa adds that we should definitely do it. Louisa, the Ministry of Education agrees with you, so you're on the right track there. Anna and Andrea agree as well. So it seems that I'm speaking to the converted today. And I would also defend that this is something that we should be doing in the classroom. Right, now for 3 main reasons, and I'll be sharing my reasons with you. Some of you have already sort of started the same reasons that I have. Now, my first reason is that, in fact, rephrasing, when it's done properly, develops a deeper understanding of knowledge. And I think we've all had that kind of experience where students get the right answer, but they're not able to explain why. You know, when you ask them why, they tell you, oh, yeah, well, because it sounds right. Have you had that happen to you? If you have, type in the chat box so I don't feel alone. This happens to me quite often, actually. Now, if we're actually working on rephrasing, we're helping them see grammar in a whole different light, which helps them understand the whys. Now, you know that I am a huge critical thinking fan. Monica, it's so great to see that you also get this all the time. Sometimes I think it's just me. Paul is also saying quite often, so it's good to feel like we're not alone. Now, as I was saying, you know that I'm a huge fan of critical thinking. So naturally, I look for activities that develop this in the classroom in different ways. And surprise, surprise, rephrasing is one of those activities. So this means that we could actually be killing two birds with one stone, because we could be doing rephrasing and at the same time also be thinking about how we could be developing critical thinking skills. And if you attended the last webinar, then you'll remember that we spoke about the intellectual traits. If you haven't, don't worry, because you can watch the recorded version on YouTube. So it's never too late, as they say. And one of those intellectual traits was speaking about confidence in reason. Now, rephrasing does exactly this, because it gets you to compare a first sentence and contrast it with lots of possibilities and then come up with your final answer. So that's a really good reason to do rephrasing. But if you're like a student, then you only do things if it's going to be in the test. You know how they ask you, teacher, is this going to be in the test? And when you say yes, then whoa, they really listen to you. Well, guess what? Rephrasing is one of those favorite questions that any good test or exam has. So this is a really good reason to do it. Hi, Marinella, thanks for joining us. Right, now, we're convinced that we need to have this. Filomena's adding another lovely reason, which is really that students can play with language. And Filomena, this is exactly what I was saying by developing a deeper understanding of that language, which can be done in quite a playful mode. Right, now, we all agree that students find rephrasing difficult, don't we? And you can just type in the chat box if you do, if your students also feel this, so that, well, once again, I don't feel alone. Now, the question is, why do they find rephrasing so difficult? Because they're able to get simple grammar exercises right, but somehow when you ask them to rethink grammar and to associate things, they get lost, right? So Josephine is agreeing that some of them do. I mean, luckily, some of them are ace this, but they would ace anything anyway. So the question is, what have you noticed in your classes that's happening that makes rephrasing so difficult? Filomena started us off by saying that sometimes it's a matter of vocabulary. Alder is adding that they're not used to thinking. And Alder, I totally agree with you. Many of them just regurgitate. They know that if they regurgitate things, they'll be okay. Now, Manuel is adding that thinking is really difficult. Maria Diaz is saying that it's really demanding. So they need various skills to actually being able to do this. Anna, I totally agree with you. They need scaffolding. And Louisa, oh yeah, rearranging vocabulary, and I would add grammar, is challenging. But as Fatima said, if we present it in a challenging way, then their little antennas come up. So that will be the question. How are we going to do that? Now, before we actually answer that question, have a look at my reasons. Well, basically, I would defend that rephrasing is, in fact, a very complex process. And the reason why I'm saying this is that they need to understand the full meaning of the sentence, but then they need to compare and contrast these skills. And as Manuel has just said, the problem is that they have trouble doing this in their native language, never mind in English. So this means that they need to have a fair range of vocabulary, as you've already mentioned, as well as idiomatic expressions and quite advanced grammar skills, right? So this is difficult. And the question is, how are we going to actually be able to bring in and create some rephrasing stamina in the classroom? Well, if we know the secret to this answer, then rephrasing might actually stop being a demon and transform itself into something that's actually, wait for it, are you ready, fun, and that they actually ask us to do. Right, so let's have a look at how. And this is the end of the theory in my webinar. From now on, I'm going to invite you to come into my classroom and be one of my students. So the first thing that I have to ask you is, do you trust me enough to be your teacher? Can you please type in the chat box if you do? And I think that this is absolutely essential. We need to build up confidence with our students so that they feel at ease and that they trust us to do these more difficult tasks that you are saying that they have to do, right? So Elizabeth, thank you for your vote of confidence today. Thanks, Anna. I see Abby's also giving me a thumbs up, as is Eva. Right, now I'm going to ask you to divide your brain into two. Thank you, Cardinal, for trusting me. I trust you too to come into my classroom. Now I'm going to ask you, please, to divide your teacher brain into two. Can half of your brain think as you? In other words, would this work in my classroom? Can I do this exactly as it is? Would I need to make some tweaks? If I would need to make some tweaks, what tweaks would I need to make? And can the other half of your brain think about this as a student? So give yourself the luxury of actually experiencing the different steps. Right, so having said that, today I have 6 steps to share with you. 1 for every day of the week and 1 for a bonus, because you know what they say, we wouldn't be able to get through the week without the weekend. Right, so my first tip today would be, encourage your students to start really thinking about grammar. In other words, not just adding a set of rules to regurgitate in the test, but actually to think about grammar and what it means. And one of my favorite tools in the classroom is the KWL chart. Now, as you know from my last webinar, it is a graphic organizer that helps students organize their thinking and their learning at the same time. So if you have a look at the screen, you'll be able to see that I've got a grammar page. And this grammar page is speaking about modal verbs, right? Which we've all heard about before. Now, what we can do with the KWL chart is to raise grammar awareness to what we already know about the grammar. So I'm going to ask you, please, to type in your chat box and to pretend that you're a student in my classroom. But before I do that, I just want to echo what Elizabeth is saying. Basically, what this KWL chart is going to do is allow us to decode what we already know to then be able to assimilate new learning. That's exactly it, Elizabeth. Thank you for such a pertinent comment. Right, now, can I please ask you to pretend that you're a student and to type in the chat box what you already know? Elizabeth, don't get stressed out with the delay. You're on time somewhere in the world, don't worry. And because the webinar is being recorded, you can watch the beginning on another day, whenever you have the time. So it's fine, don't worry. Right, now, can you just type in what you can remember that the teacher last year taught you about those modal verbs? You know, the can, the could, the will, you know what I mean, right? Okay, so give yourself a think and then type in just one thing that you know. Philomena is saying that these verbs are very, very special. I give that a thumbs up. I would totally agree. Oh, Paul is saying that they're so special that they're actually tricky. Monica, I love this comment. They're actually kind of like auxiliary verbs. Fatima, I totally agree that they're followed by the bare infinitive. Ligia, sometimes they can get a bit confusing because they have more than one superpower, right? So Alexandra is saying that they're very, very special verbs. Now, I'd like you to move on to think about what would you like me to teach you today about modal verbs. So what would you like us to learn together about these modal verbs? Think about this. You already know so much, but there must be something that you'd like to learn. And Isabel, I agree that modal verbs work in pairs, right? They never like to be alone. And Carmen, I also agree that they change our speech, right? Yep, Christina, they do give our sentences different meaning. Right, now let's think about what we want to learn. So Fatima is saying the difference between must and have to. Anna is saying the purpose. So what exactly do we use them for, right? Emilia is saying that they're tricky, so perhaps Emilia wants to understand how not to get them confused. Now, as you know, the KWL chart is used during two phases of the lesson. At the beginning of the lesson, the students are only filling in column 1 and 2, and then at the end of the lesson, they come back to column 3, right? Now, what does this real thinking about grammar mean? Well, it means thinking about these different ways that modal verbs can work to simplify language. So if you have a look at my slide on the screen, you can see that I can say, I can speak English. And this is exactly the same as I am able to speak English. So in a way, modal verbs are very poupadinhos because they can say the same thing using fewer words. Now, isn't that cool? That's pretty cool, right? And this is the type of learning awareness that we are going to have to bring into the classroom, right? Alcinda is saying that it's also about showing them subtle differences, like the difference between may and might. I totally agree. Right, so this KWL chart would perhaps help students start to understand the subtleties of language. Ligia, grammar is fun. You just need to know how to take it with a smile, and you evidently have. Right, now, once we've done this, then what I like to do with my students is play around with that grammar. So that's what I'm going to invite you to do today. Once they understand that can is the same as be able to, or any of the other modal verbs, then I want them to start playing around with that grammar, and I want them to start experimenting for themselves. And there is one tool that I absolutely love using, and I'm just getting it ready on my phone because my phone decided to be creative and switch off as I was speaking to you. And that is a random number generator. Now, the random number generator, basically, you can download on your phone, and it's a free app. You can download that either from Google or from, well, any other app store that you use. And it will allow you to choose a number randomly. In other words, I'm not picking on any number. I don't have any favorites, but I'm actually, well, putting myself in Lady Luck's fate. Now, as you can see, my random number generator allows me to type in the maximum number. And once I've done that, then I can just generate a number for you. And what I ask the students to do is to have a look at all those expressions that we had a look at, which I've put on the screen for you in a box. So can, or be certain to, or should, or be forbidden to. And now what they have to do is make a sentence with the number on my phone. So can you please pretend to be a student and type in any sentence you want with the verb can? Look, it's great to see that you're also using this in the classroom. I've never had problems with students saying, oh, it's not fair, I always get the most difficult one. No, they don't, because the random number generator is the one that's chosen. Right, so let me remind you of what I'd like you to do. Just type in a simple sentence, any sentence you want, with the verb can. Now remember that can has an amiguinho, so don't forget that main verb. And I also remind students about these grammar rules as we're having fun. Right, now Elisa has typed in a sentence that I love. I can help you. Elisa, might you have forgotten the punctuation? Have a look at Grace's sentence. I can swim. Did you notice that punctuation that she has over there? Lolita, I think you've forgotten some punctuation as well. I can ride my bike. Teresa is asking, can I speak? So Teresa's got this amazing question. She hasn't stopped at a sentence. Now, we usually play this for a few times, for a few rounds. And the first time we play it, I ask the students to make just a normal sentence. But this would become pretty boring after 3 or 4. So the next one I ask them to do is to play again, but this time to make a silly sentence. You know those kind of sentences that would be wrong in the test, but they're just fun? So I wonder, can you make a silly sentence with the number that my phone gives us? So let's have a look. My phone is asking for number 2, a silly sentence now for number 2. Let's see what you come up with. Dig deep in that creative, silly mind of yours. So number 2 will be the expression be certain to. Remember, this one's not a modal verb, but it can express the same thing. So I wonder who's going to come up with the silliest sentence of all today. I am certain to. Oh, good Lord, Elizabeth, you've set the bar really high. I'm certain that the earth goes round the moon. Yes, that's quite a silly sentence, isn't it? I'm safe and certain. I'm certain that I fail. Alicia, you always know the answer. So that's a pretty silly sentence. Now, you could get other kinds of categories. You could get a funny sentence, or in round 3, you could ask the students to make a George Clooney sentence. In other words, one of those sentences that has the perfect punctuation and vocabulary. You know, those that we look at and drool at? So I wonder if you can make a George Clooney sentence now, level 3, with the number that my phone chooses. Let's see. And my phone has chosen number 9. So a really posh sentence with number 9. And number 9 is a semi-modal, have to. Let's see who comes up with the most good-looking sentence of all. Have to. Remember, a George Clooney one, not any old sentence, really good vocabulary. Now, Aldina, he is certain to be gorgeous. I love that word, gorgeous. But remember, we want the semi-modal verb have to. I have to go for a walk. Now, that's not a bad sentence, but I wonder if we could have some more adjectives just to make that sentence look better. How are we going for a walk? Perhaps introduce an adverb. Where are we going for a walk? That's something you might be able to do. Right, Kusadu, nice to have you with us. Remember that you can watch the recording if you like. Oh, you have to look absolutely astonishing. Oh, Dina, you're inspired. Right, I have to meet George Clooney. Guess what, Anna Paula? I might be able to have a kunya for you on that one. Right, so as you can see, what we're doing is getting the students to experiment around with sentences. And that brings me to the next stage of their grammar learning experience. Our next step is to go a step further and to transform students from being just students of English, but then to become grammar detectives, right? So to take the additional step. And to become grammar detectives, what we really are going to do is ask them to recognize the usual grammar suspects. You know, the ones that are usually there in rephrasing. So I'd like to introduce you to some silly or usual grammar subjects and suspects, right? So meet suspect number 1. Suspect number 1 goes by the name of direct and reported speech. And this subject has been charged on quite a few accounts from repeating what other people say in a completely different way. Suspect number 2, the active and passive. Oh, this is a dangerous suspect, because this one presents reality in a completely different way. I'm really happy that you like my suspects. My students think they are really, really funny. Now, suspect number 3 is quite shady. He's known for putting up some pretty difficult conditions. Are you ready to meet suspect number 4? Suspect number 4 has some really wacky connections, as you can see from his profile. That brings me to suspect number 5. Now, suspect number 5 has been around for a while now, so he's quite sabido. He knows a few tricks. Suspect number 6 is really dangerous. He has a superpower, which is looking so cute. He can convince you to do anything that he wants you to do. Now, are you ready to meet the most dangerous, the most powerful grammar suspect of all? I wonder if you'd like to type in the chat box, which one do you think this is? So if you think all these suspects are mean, well, you've got something coming to you with suspect number 7. So could you type in the chat box what you think is the trickiest grammar suspect of all? Right, it's really good to see that you like my grammar suspects. Tenses, Vanda is saying. Vanda, this one is even worse than tenses. Phrasal verbs, Madalena, you're hot. You're almost there. They're almost as bad. Conditionals, Anna, easy peasy, lemon squeezy in comparison to this suspect. Let me show you who this is. So, ladies and gentlemen, meet suspect number 7. People literally shake when they see him in a grammar exercise. Oh, yeah, idiomatic expressions. You either love them because they look wonderful, or you hate them because there are so many to decurar. But really, they are quite irresistible. Right, so, oh yes, Emilia, collocations, it's all about that, isn't it? Sylvia, I will gladly give you all my images. And actually, I have a goodie bag for you, so I've prepared a little more. Right, now, once the students know who the grammar suspects are, then it's time to help them recognize them in sentences. So I'd like to invite you to be my students and to type in which grammar suspect is at stake here. So have a look at this first sentence. My sister is learning Arabic so she can get a good job in the future. Notice that little word able. There's a grammar suspect here. Which one do you think it is? Can you type in the chat box which one you think it is? Look carefully there. My sister is learning Arabic, so she can, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, get a good job in the future. Now, you don't need my help, but in the beginning, students do. So you've all got the right answer. Oh yeah, this is definitely the cutest grammar suspect of all, modal verbs. Now, I am interested in the right answer, but I'm just as interested in the thinking that leads to this answer. So now I'd ask students to type in the chat box how they knew this was the right answer. So there must have been some word in my sentence that showed you that this grammar subject was up to his usual tricks. Can you type in the chat box what word that was? So what was the pista that you saw that made you sniff that modal verbs was the culprit of this crime? Think about it. Oh, that's it. You're really good students. You do this really, really quickly. Can. Right. Are you ready for another go? So, next sentence. She said that she didn't know the answer to that grammar question. And now we have a little pista don't. One of the grammar subjects is up to his usual tricks. Which one is it this time? Right, think about it. Bye, Teresa. Which one is it this time? That's it, Alda, the wonderful grammar subject of direct and reported speech. Now, how did you know that, Alda? What made you say that? What was the pista that showed you? Oh, this is suspect number 2. Right, so could you type that in your chat box? Because remember, the right answer is important, but the thinking behind that is just as important. Elder, I totally agree with you. That said that, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, is showing us that direct and reported speech is at play. Right, you've got this one right. So, level 3. Oh, this one's a little more difficult. If I don't study grammar, I don't get full marks in the test. And now we have the pista unless. So what grammar suspect has come to play today? Let's see. Oh, that's it. If and unless. So those conditionals that you mentioned just now. And how did you know? Can you type in the chat box? How did you know that? That is indeed the right answer, as I'll show you. But how did you know that? How did your detective eye see that? Oh, Darlene, that's it. The little word if there. And of course, the word unless. So let the suspect identification continue. Ooh, this time we have one that makes us think a little harder. Although I didn't practice very much, I got the grammar exercise right. And now I have to use despite. So which suspect has come to play? Right, Delphina, I love your explanation for the previous suspect. So this idea of if and not and unless. Right, you are all wonderful. You know this. You're really good at this. So this is that one that has those shady connections, right? Connectors. And connectors, oh, there's a lot to say about these. Right, I think we have time for one or two more. So have a look at this one. My friends and I have been studying grammar for 6 years now, and now we want to use since. So which one has come to play today? My friends and I have been studying grammar for 6 years now. What might this be? Since and for, that's it, Alder. You're pretty good at this. In other words, the tenses that we were speaking about just now. Right now, Alden, you know the right answer, but you know that I like to know what the pista was. What gave it away? How did you know? And Alexandra has just stepped in and given us the right answer. Well, it has to be the present perfect because of this business of for and since. Okay, right, so there's the right answer. Now, one last one and then we'll move on. I can't understand what you're saying. You're not pronouncing your words correctly. And I warn you that this one is quite a difficult one. I can't understand those words correctly. And now there's something with eat. Which one might this be? This one's not easy. Remember that suspect that gives us lots of headaches? Oh yeah, the idiomatic expressions. So the one that we love and we also love to hate. Manuela, idioms, that's it. Right, so again, I would ask the students, how did you know that? Show me the pista and focus on that in the classroom. And this is important for us to be able to move on to the next tip, which is really all about making grammar thinking visible. Now, this is really, really important because without this, we're not going to be able to get all the students to understand rephrasing. And there's something that happens to me in my classroom, which I wonder whether that happens to you. Please feel free to type in the chat box if it happens to you. Do you have one or two students that always know the right answer? You know, it doesn't matter what you ask them, they always know. And the others are still starting to think and they're already shouting out that right answer. So they just know, and they don't know how they know, they just know. Now, the problem with this is that they're so eager to give the right answer that weaker students think, oh, não vale a pena. Right. O João vai sempre responder. So why should I work for this? And this is a problem because then they don't make an effort to understand the thinking. So you'll notice with my suspect identification, Lisette, I can see that you feel the same frustration about this as I do. But with the previous activity, you'll notice that I do validate the right answer. Yes, it's that suspect. But then we move a step further and we stop and think about, why is it the right suspect? Now, this is essential because I also have 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 students, and I'm going to stop counting there, who kind of just look at you like, huh? How did you know that? And these are the ones that simply decode everything and shapad it in the test. If these students can't start to understand grammar, then they don't have a very high chance of getting that rephrasing right. So what we are now going to do is we are going to play with the grammar, we are going to fix the grammar, identify the suspect, but we're going to add a new level to it. In other words, we're going to talk ourselves through the right answer. Okay, so have a look at this one. I can't understand what you're saying. You're not pronouncing your words correctly. So just now you told me, and very well said, this is the grammar suspect idiomatic expressions. Now, there is something about this eat that makes me think a little bit. Can anybody type in the chat box what I'm thinking about this eat, or what that eat makes you think about? So think about this with me. I can't understand what you're saying. You're not pronouncing your words correctly. And we know it's an idiomatic expression. And we know that there's an eat involved. So is there, oh, wonder, that's exactly it. And Odette, I have trouble deciding who answered first. So we'll just agree that both of you win today. Right, there's the idiomatic expression, eat one's words. Now, this eat one's words must be similar to something in the original sentence. So can you help me find out what eat one's words is similar to in my original sentence? So Alcinda, you've got the perfect answer, but before we get there, let's just see how we get there. So eat one's words, eat your words. This is the same as something in the original sentence. What is it? Let's see if somebody can help us today. Remember, I can't understand what you're saying. You're not pronouncing the words correctly. So it's exactly that, Suli, not pronouncing. And this is important because students need to understand that they will never rewrite that equivalent expression in their answer. Eat one's words is the same as not pronounce words correctly. Therefore, we will keep I can't understand what you're saying, but we will never ever say you're not pronouncing your words correctly. Now, there's something else that we need to bear in mind, and that is the tense of this sentence. So Judith, shiny star for you because you've got that tense right. You're eating your words. Now, how did Judith know, class, that the present continuous was the tense that was needed? Can anybody find that peach stem? So I can't understand what you're saying. You're not pronouncing your words correctly. When are you not pronouncing your words correctly? Well, that's it. Now, because the action is happening at the moment of speaking. Now, Conceição, this one's easy for students. That's why I've started with this one, but some of them aren't that easy. So it's absolutely essential that we walk them through this thinking process. Right, so as you typed in the chat box, the right answer would be, I can't understand what you're saying. You're eating your words. Right, are you ready for another one? Okay, now, we identified the suspect just now, and the suspect is, although I didn't practice very much, I got the grammar exercise right. Remember we said that this one was the one with the shady connections. So connect is here. Right now, what do I notice immediately? There's a piste there. Now we know that this although is the same as, anybody? Let's think about this. What is the piste? What's our starting point going to be? Alice has jumped a step forward. Okay, Alice, I'll move on with you. We know that although is expressing concession, and this is the same as despite. So, as Paula has just said, we're using connectors of contrast. Now, we know that although is followed by a subject verb, but despite isn't, as you've just written in the chat box, despite not having. So despite is followed by the ing form. And in this case, as, this chat box has gone by so quickly, so I think it was Anna, but I'm not absolutely sure. I think Anna immediately typed in despite not, right? I think that was Anna. Despite not having. Right, so what are we doing here? Well, we know that this ing has to be in the negative, and the negative of the ing is not, as you've just stressed. So the right answer would then be, despite not practicing very much, I got the exercise right. And this is when Paula in my classroom has that aha moment, when she understands, oh, this is how João does it. And it helps Paula, but it also helps João understand the why. Because when I ask him why, he just says, oh, because it sounds right. Oh, Vanessa, it sounds right, so it must be right. Okay, we have time for one more. My sister is learning Arabic, so she can get a good job in the future. Now we need able. Remember, we identified this subject, remember, as the tricky, the one that wins your heart over, the one that nobody can resist. Do you remember? Modal verbs. Now, what can we say about this thinking? Remember, we decided that be able to was similar to can. So this is what we need to show them first. We're speaking about can, ability, modal verbs, as Katerina and Maria José has just typed in. Now, this can is the same as another expression. Which expression? Oh yeah, Sylvia, you've hit the nail on the head there. So have you, Elizabeth. This is the same as be able to. So when I say my sister is learning Arabic so she can get a good job in the future, I know that we will never write this can because be able to is the same as this can. And Carla is a shiny star because she knows the right answer. Now be careful, if you're not as quick as Carla, you can't forget that be able to is followed by the verb, as Isabel has just typed in the chat box. And that verb has to be in the infinitive. So I'm going to have to say, so that she is able to, and the verb in the infinitive. And of course, the right answer that so many of you have already typed in the chat box is, my sister is learning Arabic so that she is able to, be careful, infinitive, get a good job in the future. And Conceição and Anna, I would totally accept that you use the future here, because you could also see this as a future action, not as an action now in the present relating to the future. So you get a thumbs up for me as well. Right, so time for another tip. And the next tip is going to be vary the classes a little bit. So bring the grammar clinic into your classroom, because no matter how exciting the suspects may be, they might become boring after a few lessons, if you know what I mean. So my next activity was inspired by Dr. House. Are there any House fans out there? Now, as you know, in the series House, well, it's all about this doctor who's able to miraculously diagnose these really strange and rare diseases and come up with the perfect cure in the nick of time. Katerina, I'm glad to see that you also like Hugh Laurie. Elizabeth, you too. Maria Augusta as well. You see, he's a popular man. Right now, what we want to do is to transform our students into medical specialists. So guess what, guys? Today, you've been upgraded. You are not normal students. Oh, no, 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 no. You are as powerful as Dr. House. So I'm going to show you some patients who I must confess are on the verge of dying. Only you can save them. And to save them, you have to first diagnose the disease and then come up with the cure. Remember, you first diagnose the disease and then you come up with the cure. So, are you ready to meet patient one? Now, patient one has been in all the top hospitals of this planet, and only you can help them. Patient one has traveled many miles so that you can see his clinical case and chart. Right, this is what patient one looks like. You must go in on a summer course to improve your English. Yeah, I know it's bad. It doesn't look good. And if we don't come up with the right treatment in the next few minutes, he might not make it. Okay, now remember, Elizabeth, 2 steps. First step, diagnose the disease. Second step, come up with the cure. So Judith, well done there. You've come up with a pista, right? Must, modal verbs. What do we know about this disease? We need must followed by, oh, that's it. Must is always followed by a very, very special form of the verb. And yes, must does express an obligation. So yes, you were right. The disease is looking like a modal verb. Now, as you remember from our previous exercise, and Anna Maria has just typed it in the chat box, Anna Maria, I could hug you now. Must is followed by the bare infinitive. Sylvia, yeah, the infinitive without to. The bare infinitive. So this means that the cure for this patient would be, would you like to type in the chat box how you would cure this patient? Remember, the patient is counting on you. Yeah, Carla, the diagnosis is the infinitive without to. So what does the cure look like? And as you'll see, what we are really doing is just boring old error correction with a twist that will help us with the rephrasing. So it's exactly that, Louisa. You must go on a summer course to improve your English. So would you type in the chat box, do you think that your students would like to become Dr. Houses? Do you think that they'd like to play around with grammar and identify suspects and cure patients who are on the brink of dying? Right now, I have to meter a cunha for the next patient because this one, oh my God, this one is in a bad state. Either you save him or there will be no hope. So are you ready to meet my next patient? Oh, good Lord. This exercise is all Chinese to me. You look at him and he looks like a perfect sentence. You analyze him grammatically and there's no grammar mistake. That's why so many doctors on the planet have not been able to diagnose the disease. But luckily you can. Elizabeth, this is indeed a clinical case for only the best of the best. So have a look at the sentence, have a look at the patient. This exercise is all Chinese to me. Aha, Anna, I totally agree with you. This would mean I don't understand it. And Anna and Anna Maria have gone a step further by saying that this I don't understand is an idiomatic expression. So we really are thinking about the expression of to be Greek to someone. And yes, Alder, it is about the influence of the mother tongue, which in some cases can really help. But in other cases, it makes disastrous sentences. So Alder is saying port English. Well, I call it portignole, right? Okay, so what are we going to do? How are we going to cure this patient, which is suffering from a really bad case of Plinglish? Can anybody help? Oh, and I know so many viruses. And you know, when you think you've solved one, another one appears. It's awful. Right, so Carla, I can't resist saying this because you're absolutely right. Something that the great George Jesus would say, snigger, snigger. Right, so they are trying to translate Paula. Yeah, and yes, Alda, it is difficult to think in English. Right, but we're running out of time. This patient is going into shutdown mode. Pretty soon, he'll go into cardiac arrest. Can anyone save him? How can we solve this patient's disease? Any cures, Dr. Houses out there? We're counting on you. Come on, we need your help. I can see your brain moving. Who's going to be the first one? So let's think in English, Anna. That's it. Haha, Judith, you win the cake today. So this exercise is all Greek to me. So what's it all about? Well, it's all about bringing some fun into the classroom. And I can read your mind. So much ooh, so much ooh. And I hear this about grammar. Would you ever have imagined? Okay, so last one today. Right, this patient is a tricky case. That's why we've kept her for last. And as you can see, the patient goes somewhere along the lines of, the solution was given to the students yesterday by someone. Tricky. The solution was given to the students yesterday by someone. Dr. House, please, can you help us diagnose this disease? Oh, that's it, Celeste. By someone. Oh, yeah, the passive. So you are all right. By is an agent in the passive. There's only one problem. We can't use this by. Why? Well, as Amalia's just said, by someone isn't needed. Elise is saying, please, please cross out the by someone. And yes, you're right. When we don't know exactly who the agent is, we simply don't mention it. So can anybody help me find the cure for this patient who's on the verge of passing on? Right, so yes, you are, John, it is an unnecessary passive agent. But the question is, what is the cure for this sentence? Anyone? So what would the sentence look like? Yeah, Fernanda, get rid of that unknown subject. That's exactly the way. Keep going. Right, so what would we say? Well, as Louisa is saying, we could add in an agent that we do know who the agent is. So we could say the solution was given to the students by the teacher. Or, Pedro, I would also accept your answer. We could just simply omit the agent altogether. So we could just have the solution was given to the students yesterday. Right, so that's it for tip 4. Let's move on to tip 5. And tip 5 is all about following the cookbook approach to grammar. In other words, making students feel safe by giving them a recipe, a kind of a cabulazinha that they can just follow and know that if they follow this, they will get it right, just as you are getting it right in my chat box. So what kind of cabula could we give them? Well, first of all, we'd have to tell them that the first step is to read the original sentence until you understand the full meaning. Because if you don't understand the sentence, there's no way that you can rewrite it, right? It might seem simple, but that's a step that many students jump. They understand mais ou menos, and then they start trying to be Dr. Houses and kill their grammar patient. Once you absolutely understand the sentence, then you're ready to move on to phase 2, which is identifying the suspect and looking for the synonyms, which you've done beautifully today. Remember to make this thinking visible so that no student gets left behind. Right, so this is really helping the student realize that some words will be kept, others will be changed, and others have very, very specific rules for changing. Once they understand that, then we're ready to move on to the actual rephrasing, which is all about rearranging the words to form a new sentence with all those grammar rules that we discussed in the grammar classroom and that we've highlighted in the KWL chart. Once they've done that, then they're ready to serve their grammar on the plate. And this would imply rechecking and double checking that the new rephrased sentence hasn't changed the meaning of the original sentence. Because if they do that, you know as well as I do that we won't be able to give them full marks for it in the test or the exam. So, what is the secret to getting rephrasing right? Well, it's all about tip 6. And tip 6 goes something along the lines of, remember, practice makes perfect. But you know as well as I do that Rome wasn't built in a day. So we need to show students that baby steps are the way to approach rephrasing. And these baby steps would imply identifying the suspect. These baby steps would imply pointing out the pistas. These baby steps would imply thinking about those rules, writing them on post-its, repeating them in class. Only after this can we actually move on to transforming. And we need to remind them that getting grammar right is all about resilience. So you know the secret to success, don't you? If at first you don't succeed, what do? Oh, that's right. You try again and again and again until you get it right. Because that feeling of acing the most difficult question in the test, haha, that's precious. And as you mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, that challenge is what makes some of us, our students, feel alive. So, time is up today, but I still have time for a thought of the day. And the thought of the day that I would like to share with you today is quite profound. And it goes somewhere along the lines of, don't start your day with the broken pieces of yesterday. Every morning, wake up as if it's the first day of the rest of your life. I hope that today's webinar is the first day of bringing rephrasing into the classroom and not viewing it as a demon, but rather as a challenge that gets you thinking and being as good as Dr. House is. No less is good enough. So you know what I'm going to say next, don't you? Glory, glory. This is the beginning of your rephrasing story. Thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you to Portiditore for organizing this for us. I'd also like to give you some good news. I will be sharing my PowerPoint with you. So tomorrow you should be getting an email from Portiditore with your certificate and also with the PowerPoint and uma fichinha, so that you can have all the images that you need and bring this approach into your classroom without getting another white hair or two. Thank you so much for being with us at the end of a very long and difficult day. And I look forward to meeting you soon. And in the meantime, if there is anything that you'd like to speak to us about or to share with us, please feel free to use our Engaging 10 email. We love hearing from you. So please do feel free to contact us. So that's a big thank you from Alexandrina, Mary, Eduarda, and I. And I guess the thing to say is, see you later, alligator. Bye-bye, everyone.